I want to welcome you all to the 4th annual Meeting of the Minds. We are here to celebrate the strengths of students and young adults like Jake, and to discover the opportunities our community is providing for these strengths to be utilized in the workplace. My name is Jen Wilger. I'm the executive director and founder of Temple Grandin School, and on behalf of our school and our staff, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. Especially our staff and our board who work all year long to make this event and our school programs all running smoothly and possible. Board members are here tonight. It's kind of dark, so I won't ask you to stand right now, but thank you for all you do for our school. We couldn't do what we do without the support of our community. That includes our staff board and people like you and folks who have helped put on and sponsor the cost of this event. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our moderator of the evening, Jason Lynch, who is a board chair of Temple Grandin School, a parent, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about tonight's topic and program. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone, for coming out on this beautiful spring evening in Boulder. We are grateful to have you here. For those of you who've been here before, you know this is a fun and lively, engaging conversation, so you'll be happy you came out. Before we start, I need to thank folks who made this possible tonight, which is our sponsors. I want to tell you about each one of them because we wouldn't be here without them. First is Trimble. Trimble is a geopositioning technologies company. You're going to hear from Bryn Fosburgh, who works there, and one of their inspiring programs bringing people on the spectrum into the workforce. Thank you, Trimble. Cable Labs, who has been a leader in employing people on the spectrum, led by their CEO, Phil McKinney, and I think Phil might actually be here tonight. Phil, if you are, thank you for your leadership. Two great law firms, Davis, Graham, and Stubbs, and Koenig, Olsner, Taylor, Schoenfeld, and Gaddis, two local law firms with a bunch of public-minded lawyers at them. They turn out for their community. Thank you both. Sphero, if you don't know Sphero, they are an amazing robot company here in Boulder. At Sphero, they believe play is a powerful teacher. Trumpet Behavioral Health, a leading national autism treatment provider that believes in the potential of all children on the spectrum. Wolf Child Psychology, a long-term supporter of TGS, a trusted resource for families who are seeking to better understand their child's strengths and challenges. Clear Child Psychology, who is pioneering a groundbreaking assessment that offers an earlier and more precise autism diagnosis. Holder and Hay, company born here in Boulder. They make the weighted blanket, Redefined, one of which is downstairs in the silent auction you can check out. Frasca Food and Wine, who provided some of Boulder's best food for our reception here tonight. D&K Printing, who produced our great posters and programs tonight. And finally, the Amish Furniture Gallery, who's providing us with our seating tonight. So we're grateful for all of our sponsors. Thank you so much to them. Yes. Thank you. I want to start with why here tonight, which is why we do this at the Temple Grandin School. This is our 4th year running this event. We do it really for 2 reasons. One is part of our mission is to create dialogue and to share inspiration for the community that lives with and supports people with autistic spectrum disorder and for everyone on the spectrum. And there aren't many places to bring together this size group of people to talk and think and be inspired about that. And so part of our mission is to create spaces like that. So this is sort of a gift that at TGS we like to give to our community. The other reason we do it is to raise support, to raise financial support for TGS. You know, we are a nonprofit that is trying to bring transformative educational programming to students who aren't getting it and who can thrive if they do get it. And there's 2 ways you can help us tonight. One is the silent auction that I mentioned. If you aren't aware, downstairs in the cafe, there are some amazing items on offer, items and experiences on offer. If you haven't checked it out, please do afterward. We will probably wrap the panel about 8 o'clock. We won't close bidding until about 8:20, so please check that out and see if there's something that catches your fancy. The other thing you can do is you can make a tax-deductible donation to Temple Grandin School, and you can do that in a couple of ways. One is there's an envelope that you will find inside your program. You can use that. On page 5, the bottom of the page, there's a URL for a website where you can go to. You can also go to templegrandinschool.org and click Donate Now. If you're inspired by what you hear about tonight and you want to find ways to support our mission, and I hope you do, please go to one of those places and help us out. Before we begin, one thing we wanted to do was to share a little bit about what the Temple Grandin School model can do for students who participate in it. And I want to invite up onto the stage a parent, Kristen Quadrucci, who has a student at TGS, and she's going to tell one family story about their experience at TGS. So Kristen, if you have a second, you can come up.
I can't see anybody, but good evening. My name is Kristen Quadracci. I'm also Mama. These stories will be familiar to many of you. The collective gasps that have turned to collective sighs, the horror of, that could be my child. You can hear them here and now, or from any neurodiverse family, or in the news on any given day. The kindergartner clawed marks across his face after recess, unable to identify his attackers because he can neither look at nor recognize faces. The first grader, earning his first failing grade for his anatomically accurate drawing of a human heart instead of the Valentine shape. The second grader, refusing to read anything until his teacher gave him a book on trains. From that day on, happy to read anything about trains and only trains. Getting poor penmanship grades for drawing his letters correctly, but backwards, always starting from the end. Trying to make friends by explaining quantum string theory to his 3rd grade classmates. The 4th grader who built the Lego Millennium Falcon with over 5,000 pieces in 2 days. Studying theoretical physics to solve the problems with time travel, and wanting to write a journal paper that proved gravity was an element, but there was no one at his school of any age to explore this with. The child who draws himself as a stick figure with a blank face and triangle cat-like ears. The 5th grade teacher who told him she couldn't look at this self-portrait, his self-image, because it looked like the devil with horns and it was against her religion. This 6th grader thinking The only possible explanation for all of this was that he was a different species from another world. In middle school, his first and only friend was a teacher who was also on the autism spectrum. Other kids, they were just background noise. Tested off the charts as gifted in a school district with no way to feed his voracious hunger for knowledge. Kind and gentle children reach out to him, but he cannot differentiate them from the bullies who are constantly lying in wait, ready for any opportunity to attack. And they do attack the second the teachers turn their backs. Settling into a routine of near daily calls home to come and get him, of rarely being able to join in class, left with his own torturous thoughts and perhaps a book. Teachers and SPED staff doing everything they could, his family desperately spending every ounce of energy searching for solutions. Early in the 9th grade, the public school cleared out an office for him. It was empty except for a desk, chair, computer, and a phone with a SPED coordinator right outside the door. Given books and a computer, he taught himself. For this amazing, brilliant person, a future of living in his parents' basement on permanent disability, friendless and hopeless, this was the future that loomed. Still, trying to find an anchor in this sea of trauma, he works to formulate a theorem that division by 0 is possible. Midway through 9th grade, Temple Grandin School, also known as TGS, appeared on the horizon like this rescue boat in the unending night in the stormy sea that was his life. In our family, we mark time since our son was born as before TGS and after TGS. At TGS, for the first time in his life, he had real friends. Instead of existing only in his solitary worlds of Legos and Minecraft, he had a circle of classmates to play games with, intellectual peers with whom he could explore all the wonder and heartbreak of genuine human connection outside of his immediate family. With the staff, he began the long catch-up journey of understanding this terrifying, exciting terrain of social interaction. There's still hard times, but at TGS, they don't give up on kids. These gifted teachers can explore string theory, mathematical theorems, and time travel with him. They have opened doors to great literature, history, and other cultures. He has become a leader with a global perspective who can express himself clearly in person and in writing. In just 3 years at TGS, this kid experienced many firsts, things not possible in the before time. He can be dropped off at the store or the library or coffee shop independently to study or visit with friends. At TGS, his family made connection to truly effective resources like therapists, TACT, and SketchUp. He can meet new people now, speak to them, and remember their names. No more introductions that include, he has autism, like a warning. This kid knows his heart and mind, fearlessly advocating for himself and others, relentlessly in that focused spectrum way. He completed a livestock internship at a nearby farm, training 2 young pigs to becoming petting zoo friendly. He takes a city bus twice a week independently to success in his philosophy class at Front Range Community College. He took the SATs and earned 2 perfect scores for his writing and literature skills. He's a registered voter with a driving permit. He's getting his first paying job this summer. TGS did this in 3 years. TGS teaches this kid. TGS teaches his parents, his sibling, his extended family, his neighborhood, and his whole community. TGS teaches his school district and other schools. TGS has demonstrated to educators new and experienced what is possible. The staff showed him in his language how to bring his strength to his larger community. It is in this that he can see the reality, the freedom, and the endless possibilities of living a life he loves. This kid I have been describing is my son. His name is Stiano, and his life was saved by TGS. His first 10 years of school taught him the best ways to keep those frightening, confusing monsters called humans at bay, throwing furniture, screaming, hiding, escaping into worlds he created. In just 1 year at TGS, he became a published poet. He has given me permission, with an extreme teenage eye roll, to share these final lines of his poem, his words, with you tonight. I walked outside and I started running. Then I began exploring. Then I loved every kind soul I met. I found my tribe. I found my friends. I found my family. And I found you.
So at TGS, it's about kids like Stiano, and as I like to say, the staff and teachers at TGS are engineers of human potential. It is amazing what they do. Tonight's discussion, though, is about outside of TGS. It's about the world of employment. It's about employing people on the spectrum. It's about how being on the spectrum and being an employee, and the challenges and opportunities that creates. And we're going to have some experts with us tonight. Before we bring them up, though, I want to show you one other short video, which is going to, again, bring voices of people on the spectrum into the room here tonight. They are participants at Trimble's Project Spectrum, which is an employment outreach and training program at Trimble that we're going to hear more about tonight. But in just a couple minutes, though, we're going to see the voices of 3 individuals who are making that transition, who are out in the world, getting skills and getting ready to be employed and independent. So if we can roll that video, we'll listen to that quickly and then bring our panelists up. Thank you.
What are some of the fringe benefits that having a career has provided to you?
It's not so much a fringe benefit as a direct benefit, but independence is the big one. I'm able to afford gas for my car so I can go where I want, when I want. That's a huge thing that most people don't even think about. But just imagine having to walk everywhere because public transportation, it's fine out here, but it's not that great.
Yeah.
So that's a big benefit. I can go where I want, when I want. I have enough money to buy what food I need and pay rent and utilities each month. So I get to live on my own. Well, mostly on my own.
Yeah.
There are some things, but that doesn't matter right now. But
Yeah.
I'm more or less on my own. And that's a level of independence that growing up is kind of hard to comprehend.
So I kind of really had to focus on my independence early.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the peripheral benefits of this career, I mean, I've gone over some of them, but the support group is something that I've never experienced before in this magnitude. And just the resources, like, sure, oh, you got money, you got a job, you can progress. It's so much more than that. It's an entire situation that I've never been in before where I'm actually able to like start my life. And that's like indescribable. So I don't know if that counts as a peripheral benefit, but
I'm really thankful to have a job other people can actually explain amongst each other. Many, many times I've been in all sorts of technical jobs that no one could relate to. And in this case, I can point at a physical object and say that exists in a computer and that building. Or I can say, I work at that big GPS company. And quite frankly, that's a lot simpler than saying, I was optimizing IBM Watson for 9 hours yesterday.
No one knows.
I know.
I don't either.
IBM Watson, chess player?
Mostly.
So here's an opportunity for you to speak to what's going to be a big and important group of people. Why should companies hire an employee who's neurodiverse?
Biggest thing I can think of is because they're qualified. I guarantee to you, there's someone out there who's qualified for the position and just happens to be neurodiverse. They might be a little awkward during the interview, or they might have a resume that's a little light, but if you give them a chance, they'll probably impress you. I can't say that will happen every time, but if you're willing to try, they're out there. They want jobs, they want to work, and they can work. And as a society, we need to start to address that, because because neurodiverse conditions are on the rise, and if they all end up just getting government benefits in order to get by, it's going to put a huge strain on the economy, and we as a society need to change to accommodate them a little bit so they can work, because they can work, and it's wasted potential to just let them sit and do nothing.
I'm afraid the question almost catches us up in labels. I completely second Casey's point. However, I also just think it expands the range of everybody who can be hired. I wouldn't necessarily say I was hired for my brain. I was hired for what I filled it with. And
Yes.
That could be anybody. I was saying neurotypicals get pigeonholed. All the time my friends will tell me, I can't code this, I can't code that. That's not true.
So I think I can probably give a little more nuance to this with an example. And this is my interpretation of this example, but Elon Musk, Dan Harmon, Nikola Tesla. Like, if you think you would ever want to hire any of these three people, I'm about 95% certain all three of those people are on the spectrum. In fact, I've heard Dan Harmon talk about it, and they're all massive contributors to society. Maybe Dan Harmon just writes TV shows, but philosophically, he's really riveting. Elon Musk, if you've ever heard him just like go on about existential topics, he basically described a lot of things that I was already thinking about. But just the mindset and the processes that people like this go through. Somebody like Nikola Tesla, everybody knows is a quirky person, but it's not somebody whose ideas or works you would dismiss quickly. So like if you can just think ahead to this person eventually having this potential, then you can probably easily see the benefit of hiring somebody who's neurodiverse.
Yeah, neurodiverse individuals, they tend to be a little, well, I don't want to say weird, but that's probably the closest word. They're a little strange sometimes, but they're still just a person underneath all that, and they have their hopes and dreams, and some of them are really smart, and they'll be very grateful to have a job.
I'd now like to invite our panel up, Dr. Temple Grandin, Tiffany Fixter, Bryn Fosburgh, and Danny Combs. Come on up. We'll get started.
Really bright.
Now, I am privileged to have sat next to Temple Grandin. This is my third time. It is always a privilege. Thank you again for being here. Dr. Temple Grandin really needs no introduction, but she has been named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. She's the subject of an HBO movie about her life. She is an acclaimed author, a professor at Colorado State University, and an outspoken advocate for the strengths of people on the spectrum. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
To her left is Tiffany Fixter, an educator turned entrepreneur. She founded Brewability Lab and Pizzability in Denver, where she creates life-changing career opportunities for people with disabilities. If you have not been to the brewery or the pizzeria, you must go. They are fabulous. Thank you for being here. And to her left, Bryn Fosburgh has worked at Trimble Navigation since 1994 and is today Senior Vice President. Trimble serves industries such as agriculture, building and construction, transportation, and natural resources in 150 countries around the world. Trimble provides high-tech positioning tools such as GPS and optical and inertial technologies to its customers. At Trimble, Bryn has been an enthusiastic supporter of Project Spectrum, the outreach and employment program for young adults on the spectrum whose participants we just heard from. Thank you, Bryn, for being here. And Danny Combs, a wayward musician turned educator, who is also the founder of TACT, Teaching the Autism Community Trades, a program that transforms the lives of individuals on the spectrum by giving them marketable trades and an employment future that few thought they would have. We look forward to hearing about that. Thank you, Danny. So to get our conversation started tonight, I wanted to start with asking each of you to take a moment and describe how you came to be where you are today, working with this population, and creating the programs and supporting the programs that you're responsible for now. I'm going to start, though, Temple, with you. You've written and spoken extensively about your background, and so I'd like to ask you a more specific question to start. I recently read your book, Different, Not Less, which I recommend to everyone. And in it, you described that at the time you were writing that book, it was a period in your life when you were doing a lot of speaking and teaching, and you weren't doing very much technical work, and that you missed that, and you missed the technical work. I wanted to ask you, over your career, you've done a lot of different things. What are the work experiences that you've enjoyed the most?
I really like designing and building things, and I worked with lots of skilled tradespeople that I know are on the autism spectrum. Most of them are retiring now, and they're not getting replaced. We're losing really clever mechanical engineering kinds of skills that can be done by people on the spectrum. I'm really concerned about that. People ask me how to get involved in the cattle industry. I got exposed to it. And I think it's just so important that one of the avenues that some of these students need to get exposed to are skilled trades. We got a gigantic shortage of electricians. I talked to the project managers of our new buildings, plumbers, mechanics for trucks and cars, and welders that can read drawings, and heating and air conditioning. Good jobs, and they're not going to get replaced by computers. Wouldn't bother studying radiology. And I have a little secret about Elon Musk. He's got a sense of humor. I got to drive in a Tesla, and his kids discovered a piece of software in this car that shows that he really has a sense of humor. I'll tell you about it afterwards. Or do you want me to tell you about it now?
All right, give it to us now. We got to hear it.
The car has a fart app. I'm not kidding. Not kidding. You can choose 5 different farts, including Big Falcon Rocket, and it farts on the turn signal. And this came with the car. Okay. That sounds kind of spectrum-y, doesn't it?
Yeah. Ask your Tesla dealer about that the next time you're down there. Yeah.
Well, the kids found it. Parents didn't even know the car had that app.
Tiffany, tell us about how you came to create Brewability Lab and Pizzability.
So I'm a former special education teacher. I did most of my work in the inner city of Kansas City, Missouri, and I had an undergrad in Northwest Missouri State, and then a master's in autism from University of Kansas. And I moved to Denver to run an adult day program, and they fired me for lack of creativity. So I wanted to show my creative side, and I started a brewery. I just wanted to do something that was
Prove 'em
social.
wrong.
Yeah, prove them wrong, of course. And do something fun and very social, and that's cool. And so did that, and we recently opened a pizzeria in Cherry Creek at 250 Steel Street. And so we sell our pizza and beer.
And tell us about your employees. Who are you hiring?
So I'm hiring a little bit of everybody, anywhere from people that are pretty nonverbal all the way to Asperger's. So we have a wide range of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So nobody's off limits. We have some people that work 5-10-minute shifts, and then they transition all the way up to 20 hours a week.
Great. Bryn, tell us about
how you came to be working with Project Spectrum.
So I'm now intrigued on this FART app. Any boy would be intrigued by the FART app for sure.
Oh, and I've got a picture of it on my phone.
I can't wait. About 7 years ago, give or take, Trimble approached Google, and actually Google approached Trimble on the acquisition of SketchUp. And Trimble was growing into our building construction phase, and SketchUp was by far the leader in three-dimensional modeling from an architectural aspect. And so we were going through the negotiation, and we needed to bring the employees over from Google, and we were competing against free lunches and climbing things and a whole bunch of massages and things like that. And so the actual founder of Project Spectrum, or one of the visionaries behind it, is a guy named Tom Wyman, a huge hero of mine. And he ran the sales department for SketchUp at that time. He's also a great skateboarder. And he came to me and he said, for me, Project Spectrum is a very important thing. Do you think you'd support Project Spectrum? Well, being an engineer coming from the GPS side, I said, of course, we're into spectrum. We always are looking at spectrum, and I was thinking of it from an electromagnetic perspective. So we got done closing the deal, and we moved into this place in Boulder, kind of off of Walnut. And we were in there, and he says, okay, now let me introduce you about Project Spectrum. We went into this conference room, and I was expecting to see something from my college physics class, and all of a sudden he started presenting these classes that SketchUp was doing from a for Project Spectrum. And what they had found back in 1999 was that many people on the spectrum were becoming attached to SketchUp because of their affinity from a spatial perspective and 3D modeling. So he showed me a video, and that video showed a nonverbal young lady who was designing her home. And she went through, we roughly have 5-6 day classes. She was going through, first day she didn't talk, second day, but she was starting to interact with her peers. She finally got up and was able to verbalize her whole model and her house through SketchUp. And so at that time, it went back to something our founder always told us, who is a big part of my life, who said that you only have strength through diversity. And so from that point on, we never looked at anything from a neurodiversity perspective as a disability. We really look at it as a strength. And you saw the 3 young men up there who I'm very, very proud of, and it brings a tear to my eye every time I see them. So that's how we got it.
That's great. Danny, how did you get from Nashville to TACT in Colorado?
Kansas was brutal. It's a long story, so I wouldn't be here without my family. My son, Dylan, who's 10 years old, has autism. And my family background is trades, so I'm 4th generation tradesman. My father, who's here tonight, and my son was naturally good at, or is naturally good at visual thinking and making things, and he would just make the most amazing things in the world, even though he wasn't speaking at the time. And my great-grandfather and grandfather worked for a company called Grumman and did lunar module and aerospace stuff. Boeing stuff. And my father, his life changed everything. I'll let him tell you about it. He's here tonight if you want to talk to him about it. But he ended up becoming an engineer after an accident and became a civil engineer and made me and my brother. And when you're 4th generation tradesman, you naturally go to Nashville and do music,
What trades were you from?
Carpentry and aerospace and mechanical. Okay. And I grew up, and honestly, I did not like it. I was free labor every day after work. I was having to show the old man how to do everything. So no, it was my brother and I. We learned everything from him, where he would teach us everything. He wasn't the kind of contractor that hired everything out. We were wiring it and building it and framing it and shingling it everything. And so I went to Nashville and did music, and I played with a lot of musicians that you guys would recognize. I won a Grammy Award. I did okay. My son's life just changed that. You know, Tennessee, we were fighting Mississippi for last in about everything. And we were looking, his mom and I, for a fresh start for a better life, and came here and had the idea for a trades program. It's what my family does. And actually met Temple and said, I have this idea for this program of teaching kids trades and technical skills. And she goes, stop what you're doing and do it. And so I did. And it was actually 3 years ago tonight that we announced the idea of TACT. And last night I was driving my son back to his mom's house, and I was telling him about tonight, and he goes, so Dad, do you only do this because Temple told you to do it? And I go, no, son, I do it because you inspired me to do it. And he goes, really, I inspired you more than Temple? And I was like, yeah, you did, son. So we teach trades and technical skills to individuals with autism. Everything that Temple says, we teach. We're the only program, sadly, I don't know why, in the entire country doing this, maybe because we pay out the ass for insurance. But we teach welding, carpentry, auto mechanics, graphic design, engineering, soldering, rocket building, tons of different things. And then we have an LLC where we employ individuals with autism, and we do residential remodeling, commercial remodeling, dirt coffee, we built that. We do auto restorations and classic cars, because everybody knows classic cars are cooler. They don't have the fart app, but that would be a good thing to add. You know, you're in your 67
Takes a certain
Ford,
sense of humor.
It does.
Put that on that fancy computer screen on that really fancy car.
We'll hook it to the carburetor. It'll be lovely. So.
That's great. One of the things that the story we heard at the start about Stiana, a student at TGS, but that I think you have all seen, is that there's a tendency to underestimate this population. Now, Temple, you are the exhibit A and not underestimating anybody.
But the thing is, there's certain things I can do well, and there's other things I can't. I absolutely couldn't do algebra. So how to get through college? Fortunately, in '67, the required class was finite math, which was statistics, matrices, and probability, which was a bit more visual, and with tutoring, I got through that. But I'm seeing this draconian algebra requirements. The state of Pennsylvania is a good example. You got to pass the English, choice exam, biology, and algebra, and if you don't go anywhere, and you're locked out of the community college to take auto shop, which is completely ridiculous. You need the arithmetic the way it was taught in the 50s, but we're losing skills, especially on the visual thinkers. I went to a state-of-the-art poultry plant last week. Well, my poultry welfare hat is like jumping for joy. My education hat is crying. They ship that stuff over here in 100 shipping containers because we don't make it anymore. And it's a kind of real clever visual thinking, lots of conveyors and the kind of clever equipment. It's not the sort of stuff like calculating the path of a rocket. And the Europeans have kept teaching those skills. And I worked with all kinds of creative craftsmen on the projects I did. They're all retiring now, and they can't replace them. And they're not going to get replaced by computers. Perfect field for them to go into. Welding, you got to learn how to read blueprints. That's essential.
When you first started out working, Temple, did you find that your supervisors underestimated you?
I had a very strong urge to prove that I could do it. And I did those dip-vat projects when they were shown in the HBO movie. The HBO movie shows exactly how I think. It's called Temple Grandin, a whole bunch of shoes coming up. Everything I think about is a picture. And I think another thing we need to be asking is, where is a student 10 years after high school? I had gone through college, I'd got my master's degree, but I was doing those first big projects. And one of the things that motivated me is I wanted to prove I wasn't stupid. That was a really big motivator.
Mm-hmm. Tiffany, what's your experience been with your employees? I mean, you employ a lot of folks that I think people probably would underestimate. What have you seen when people get into the workforce?
I I have a lot of people, when we first do our interviews, they're like, well, I can only clean, or I can only do boxes, or I can only be a dishwasher. I'm like, how do you know? You haven't even tried. And so we do working interviews, and we make sure that everyone has a chance to do everything. I don't have one person on my staff that's just a dishwasher. Everybody does everything. We give people that are visually impaired butcher knives. But
I just need to point out that
With a mesh glove and a plastic arm.
right.
Tiffany has a blind individual chopping onions, and at the surface that sounds ridiculous at some level, but when you add the safety precaution of the mesh glove and the fact that a trained chef does it by feel, they're doing it.
Yeah, they're doing it. Yeah, so don't underestimate them. They really can do a lot more than they even have been told they can do. So just giving that experience and making sure that we do have the safety precautions in place and the right supports.
I want to mention one thing where there is a problem that I still have today, and that's multitasking. I have no memory for sequence. So if I was to work at a restaurant, let's say take apart the coffee machine and clean it up and put it back together again, when I first started, I need a pilot's checklist. Just to let's say maybe there's 5 or 6 steps, just to jog my memory. And I would need that actually today because I don't have any sequence memory. I've got no working memory. But that's an easy thing to work around. See, when I'm designing stuff, once I got the Amazon cloud open, then everything's fine. But I'm accessing it through a phone on one bar. And then that takes time for that to switch and open up another screen.
Right. So we do have checklists for everything that are visual and in words. So.
Yep.
I think Tiffany brings a good point talking about the kids, what they're told they can't do. That's the biggest thing we see is kids come to us all the time, and I'm sad to see you see that too, where they're told what they cannot do. So like in our place, so we're teaching carpentry and welding and on campus, we've got loud machines going all the time. When we first started, we had headphones out the wazoo because all of our students came to us and they were told like, we can't be around these loud machines. It's too loud, it's too loud, it's too loud.
But when they control those machines, that makes a big difference.
It does, and now I don't even know where they are, honestly, because the kids don't use them anymore. They're just like, oh, the belt sander's on, and there's a welder over there, and the air compressor, they don't care. They get used to it, and they come to be like, oh, this isn't bad, but everybody told me I couldn't do this. And then they see, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And they rise to the occasion because they're given that opportunity to actually do that.
I'm seeing too many kids getting too babied. I'm seeing too many teenagers where they don't know how to do shopping. Just very basic things. There are some parents that just are afraid to let go on the most innocent stuff, like shopping. I ran into a 14-year-old girl at the airport, and I asked her if she'd ever shopped, and they're both squirming around. So I pulled out a $5 bill and I gave it to her. I said, go buy something in that newsstand. And she went over and bought a drink and brought back the change. I think it was the first time she'd shopped. That was last year.
Yeah. Actually, my wife does that to me as well.
It's continuous learning throughout life.
But, I think it's important for an employer to be flexible, though, because whether you're on the spectrum or not, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and it's important to create a flexible work area and really define what those expectations are, and have good mentors.
Social mistakes get made. My very first job, I criticized some welding, and I said it looked like pigeon doo-doo. And Hartley, the old engineer at the Swift plant, pulled me into his office and in private quietly explained that was not appropriate talk, that I had to apologize for that. He told me what I should do in private. Old engineer, perfect job coach.
So you went back and said your wire speed's too fast, you didn't have the voltage right, and that's why it looks like that, right?
But Bryn, you operate...
farts, pigeon doo-doo, this is it.
I said buckle up when you got here.
And I said, did that app come with the car? Yes, it did.
Yeah. That's right. But how flexible can you be? You're in a traditional corporate environment. It's, you're not a company built to serve this population. How flexible can you be at a Trimble?
I would say as a workforce in general, we're flexible. You have to list what the expectations are and define what those are, but mentorship is key. And you know, we have some great mentors in this room who I'm extremely proud of, and they're the ones who really have driven the program. That active mentorship is essential to success, and they can then define those boundaries and help define those boundaries.
You also have to have a clear outcome. You got to get the work done.
Yeah.
And you don't, I mean, I knew exactly what I had to design. On the project meeting, I'd say, okay, now here's the boundaries of the job. Stay this far off the railroad right away.
Yeah.
Yes, you can have the land that's next door, we own it. You know, basically get the scope of the job, and then you have to get it done.
It's that clarity is important.
Clarity
is
clarity
essential.
of what the task is. Now, as I'm talking about this now, I'm actually seeing jobs. I'm seeing a railroad track and how far I have to stay away from it.
Right.
How far I have to stay away from the electrical substation.
Right.
And I can have the land on the other side of the chain link fence.
Yeah.
You see, that's clear.
And if you kind of define those boundaries and
That's
they're
right.
clear, you see great innovation.
Have to have clear.
Unbelievable innovation.
You innovate within that. I don't let the plant people do the designing, but I got to know what the parameters are.
Yeah.
I can either have the land on the other side of the fence or I cannot have it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have to know that up front. And I also have to have some cost constraints too.
Right.
Tiffany, you've told me that one of the supports that you have to provide in your environment are safety and protective ones. I imagine, Danny, you have that too in a shop.
Yeah.
But in the back of Pizzability, you have a special room.
So I turned my office into a sensory room.
What do you do? What's that for?
Well, paying bills is a little hard in a beanbag, but it is for our staff and for some of our guests. So if they get overwhelmed, you can either see them getting agitated, or they can express that they need a break. And it's not a fun room, it's literally to go in there and calm down for 5 minutes and then get back to
And
work.
Google has the same thing.
Everybody needs a break.
Yeah.
I need a break.
Danny, what sort of special flexibility do you employ at TACT?
Very similar to Tiffany. So we have a sensory room. We've got all kinds of different sensory stations set up for the students. We've kind of set up the environment in a more simulation type site where we want to have the students, as they're being trained for working in the trades, where we don't want it to feel like a classroom. We want it to feel like a job site, but not 100% like a job site, where it's close enough, kind of the European model, where we want it to be a natural fit from where they're going from a classroom setting into the workforce.
Well, how do you make it like a job site?
So if you walked into our garage, it would look almost exactly like an auto mechanics garage. Our lighting's a little bit different. The way our tools are organized, everything's color-coded, visually labeled, except for the tools all over the floor and oil. And it's close enough where if they go from us, like for example, Audi's one of our partners, if they're going from us to working for Audi, it's organized similar. There's that
So
responsibility.
they could go right into a car dealership shop.
Yes, ma'am, exactly. And we want them to have that ownership over their tools and everything as well. I mean, when we set up our place, we didn't just say, okay, here's a car lift, let's put a car on it. We said, here's a car lift, you're gonna put it together. Because part of it is that root fixing like you're talking about. I mean, as the baby boomers retire, it's 30 million baby boomers that are getting ready to retire. You have the largest unemployed group in the country that have autism. Their minds are amazing.
Visual thinkers.
It's perfect.
Let's just talk about the kinds of thinkers. You got the visual thinkers like me, or the photorealistic thinkers, the ones that can't do algebra. Skilled trades is a perfect fit for my kind of mind. Then you got the mathematicians, more the computer programmer types, maybe the physicists. And then you got the word thinkers. Okay, our history lovers. One of the places where they could really excel is specialized retail. There's been some real successes with going into car dealerships and selling cars.
Yeah.
Selling business insurance, selling car parts, because they're appreciated for knowledge of specialized stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. We have students, I mean, we've got a couple kids. I love classic cars. If you see one around town, it might be possible that I owned it at some point, because I don't want to tell you how many cars I buy, it's ridiculous. But our students, they'll just blow me away. They'll be like, oh, Danny, you know, the right engine for this 47th Plymouth is da-da-da-da-da. And I'm just like, okay. Or they'll hold you accountable for everything. But as I was saying, we're teaching the kids to repair and to problem solve and to think. We want them to know all of that because it opens up more avenues. Where like with our computer stuff, we teach coding. Casey, who's here, and then one of your employees comes and helps us out and does a great job. And when we're doing that, like we have 3D printers, our kids build 3D printers because we want them not just to know like, oh, that's cool how to code a 3D printer. Those 3D printers that people are using are going to break. And we need to know people that know how to fix that. It's another opportunity for employment for kids.
The other thing is, when you're weird, one of the ways to get around the interview is to show off portfolios of things that you've done. It could be an engine you've rebuilt, it could be something you made with welding, or it could be some code you did very nicely presented.
Yeah.
Where I call it, showing the work rather than yourself. So you go in and give them the 30-second wow. That's how I used to sell jobs. That's how I sold Cargill. I designed the front end of all the Cargill beef plants in North America with drawings. I sent them drawings, photos, and a brochure, and a couple of trade journal articles.
I completely agree.
Just showing the work. I could just lay it out there, and in 30 seconds he could look at it.
We just invite employers in and just say, sit back and watch. And everybody comes in, they watch what the kids are doing, and they're blown away. And then it's like, they work because they can't find you can't find people that actually are willing to work. I mean, nobody wants to work anymore. It sounds funny, but they don't.
And the traditional interview setting is not something that plays to the strengths.
We'll get around that. You just show the portfolio off. That's what I used to do. I'd go in there, just lay the drawings out and the pictures, because most of my stuff was pre-internet. Well, now we've got some websites, and we got jobs coming in on websites now, a lot of foreign work.
Tiffany, I think you said you do work interviews?
Yeah, we do video submissions, and then we do working interviews for all of the tasks.
Okay, describe one of those. How does that work? Is that?
So they come in, and we just see if they can do everything that we need. So setting up the prep station, cutting the vegetables, making a pizza, cleaning up, everything.
So you're just kind of giving them a chance.
Yeah.
Just live to see if
But
they
then
can
it's good to know that if you don't like flour, we're not the right place for you. So it's really good. Yeah.
Now, Bryn, you're dealing with a traditional corporate HR department. Talk about how hiring works in your setting and where it works and where it doesn't.
So it works with networking. Yeah, I would say HR today struggles with how to hire or actually interview for those on the spectrum. So our best way is, as we start to place interns, is really look at networking and talking to the manager. And then, like Temple said, is whether there's an actual portfolio you're showing, or you're showing them what work they've done.
Well, the HR person may not understand the coding portfolio, so you've got to get it in the hands of the people that are going to appreciate it.
Well, and they also ask questions, that are kind of nonsensical, right? Like, what are your gaps, or what are your strengths? Who really cares about that, right? And
Too vague.
And so, I'd much rather ask, a question: how do you back an elephant into a refrigerator, right? That shows that'll show a creativity versus, tell me about your last job. And so, for us, we really look at networking, and we really look at the manager, so that the hiring manager is aware to look at a portfolio and have a different discussion rather than the typical interview questions.
Well, the other thing I used to do, there's a scene in the movie where I'd go up and I'd get the editor's card. And I realized if I started writing for the farm magazine with Open Doors, it got me free press passes to big, expensive meetings.
Right.
And I'd walk up to people on the floor at McCormick Place and show them my portfolio and sell a job. I could have been thrown out of McCormick Place for that. But all I had to just show it to them for like 30 seconds. I sold a job to Canada Packers doing that.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back to a second to the idea about how we can underestimate this population. And Danny, you told me a story about a car restoration competition.
Yeah.
Will you share that story?
Sure. So we teach auto mechanics, and we start in classic cars because, with the exception of Tesla, they're cooler than every other car out there. Mm-hmm. And we restored a 75 Jeep Cherokee Chief, and we took it down to Castle Rock, and they have a big car show. They block off 6 blocks. It's 600 cars, and our students won first place. And when we did it, we didn't advertise like, hey, come look at this car that kids with autism did. It was, look at this amazing Jeep.
Let the work sell itself on its own merits.
Yes, ma'am. And everybody came up, and then they would talk to us about the Jeep, and then it was, oh, by the way, this was done by our students. One of our students tracked down the judges to demand to know where his trophy was because he knew that he won, and he was so proud of it. But I mean, that student too, so that student came to us that I'm mentioning, was at a public high school that still had auto mechanics, so kudos to them. But the school and the teacher were put in an unfortunate stance where most schools, they have 35 kids in class and one teacher. I don't know about you guys, but I don't feel comfortable around a table saw with 34 other people around me, like let alone 35 kids in a table saw. That's a bad day. So he was in this situation. He came to our program because he was kicked out of his public schools program because they didn't know what to do. And he learned auto mechanics from us, and he went back to his public school. He's in the top third of his class because of the right opportunity. His car won a car show. We partner with a classic car dealership here in town, and they sell our cars all over the world, and we don't advertise at all that it's done by us. It's just the kids are that good. I mean, we want their strengths to showcase.
Well, I never put autism on any of my stuff.
I think it's awesome.
You know,
it's
I
your
just-
talent.
I mean, now people know because of the movie, but I just put the brochures, put the stuff out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we have to quit classifying people, right? That doesn't work anywhere. You know, to me, is everybody has their strengths, and so let's look at promoting the strengths, and you know, whether you're on the spectrum or not.
You know what Stephen Hawking had to say about disability? Concentrate on the things that disability doesn't prevent you from doing well. He could do math in his head and float around in a weightless plane. Those are two things he could do well.
So, and I can do neither. So,
I might be able to do the weightless plane, but not the math in my head.
You know, we wouldn't be honest, though, if we didn't acknowledge that there are challenges to the work that you're doing. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And Temple, I might want to start by asking, you know, before you became so well known and when you were just building your career and doing the work day in and day out to build your career, what did you find to be the toughest challenges in the workplace?
Being a woman in a man's industry. That was by far the most challenging, and I had to be 3 times better than a guy. I'm appalled at how a guy can make multi-million-dollar mistakes and manage to still have a job. They were stupid mistakes because they were told that what they did wasn't going to work. Where I got bullied on the job wasn't the big bosses. It was the foremans just below the big bosses. And there's a scene in the movie with bull testicles on my vehicle that happened. They actually put that piece of metal in there and drowned the cattle that was shown in the movie. They didn't like this weird girl nerd coming in on their turf. That was much more difficult than the autism was, way more difficult. And then as a teenager, being bullied in high school, absolutely terrible. Only places I was not bullied was shared interests, horseback riding, model rockets, and electronics. That's why I emphasize to parents, get them involved in something shared interest. It could be band, robotics, it could be the school play, art.
Tiffany, as both an employer from that perspective and also in observing your employees, what do you see as being the biggest challenges to making employment work for people on the spectrum?
Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. I do see the fact that where you don't want to have a dog and pony show where, yes, they have autism, but there is, for us, a fact we're in Cherry Creek with the pizzeria, and letting the public know maybe to be more patient and more kind, just because it does take a little bit longer, or some people do need support. We have all these things in place, but they do take more time and more money. So really,
You told me about transportation issues.
Transportation, yeah, that gets very expensive. So there's so many different issues in order to support everyone that we do hire to make sure that they're as independent and successful as possible. So it's just, I do think you need some sort of public education in the fact that, hey, you need to wait a little longer.
And that's part of your kind of business identity at the brewery and the pizzeria, isn't it? That,
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, brewability and pizzability, but not everybody gets that.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes over most people's heads, which is fine. But there is an opportunity there to educate the public. And I've seen a really big change with our customers. I mean, we have 300-pound guys drop to their knees and be like, I used to bully these kinds of people, and now they're my bartender, now they're my friend. And we're getting those breakthroughs.
That's good. Bryn, how about you? What do you see as the challenges in your environment?
Yeah, I think especially in a public company, but you're always looking for some return on investment. And so, I think for some people you may look at, okay, because mentorship is key for success. And I think you could get people that would say, should we make that investment from a mentorship perspective? We see a 2 or 3-fold increase. I can put a mentor in for, say, 20% of time. I'm going to get that payback 2 or 3x. Take Boulder at the moment. It's darn near impossible to hire anybody here. It's a competitive job market. So why would you not access very, very qualified people who can fill your workforce? And so you have to show that.
As soon as you get out of here, there's plenty of work for those clever welders that can build anything. We need them.
Absolutely.
And we're losing skills. We've lost skills in pork, we've lost skills in poultry, and we're almost about ready to lose it in beef.
And I think when you look, if you don't access a part of the workforce that's more than competent to do the job,
I worked with the special ed department builds the stuff. I went down to NASA, Cape Kennedy, a year and a half ago. There's a launch pad they just finished, built by a guy with Tourette's. There's a guy who's extremely dyslexic who's doing control rooms right now. The special ed department builds the stuff. But these are people that are 50 and up.
But you made
Well, you see, as I go back and forth between the autism world and the industrial world, all these clever conveyors I saw at the chicken plant, the kid that ought to be building that stuff here now is in the basement playing video games because he didn't get a chance to take welding. You see, this is why it's all skilled trade stuff.
I know a place where you can do that.
Well, I know. What you're doing is the right way to do stuff. Because I got interested in cattle because I got exposed to it. You got exposed. You're doing the right thing. Got to expose them.
Thank you.
And there's some people that stick their nose up at skilled trades. Let me tell you, when they were working on that Cargill plant over in Fort Morgan, big, complicated job, way complicated than these cheap apartment buildings they're putting up right now.
Bryn, you also made an observation to me about loyalty in employees. Will you make that?
So turnover, definitely in the tech industry, is quite high. And it costs a lot of money for a company to retrain somebody. And so what we have found is those who have been on the intern program and then we've hired or they've went on to school for either undergraduate or advanced degrees, there's a huge loyalty to the company. And so they stay and are very part of Trimble. And that's a great return on investment when you look at it from a company perspective versus, today you get somebody who comes in and they look at where they're going to get the next stock options or the increases, and you're always battling that high tech.
Danny, what are you seeing as the biggest obstacles to making employment work for people on the spectrum?
The hardest thing for us, we've had two things. One has been our kids get good really fast and they're too young to work. So we have 14-year-olds that can now rebuild engines, and people need people that know how to rebuild engines, and it's too young to work. In this state you have to be 21 to drive a car in a car lot. That's hard when you have 18-year-olds that can work and they can't drive the car into the bay to change the oil. The hardest thing for us, though, honestly, no offense parents, has been parents. Where we've set it up where our kids, we have an 83% job placement rate, where the typical autism placement rate is 90% underemployed or not employed. Our kids get really good jobs. These aren't, no offense with bagging groceries or anything, that's fine, it's a wonderful opportunity, but our kids have the opportunity to make 6-figure salaries. They lose SSI insurance at that point, but it's not a guarantee if they don't keep that job. So the biggest thing for us is our parents come to us and they're like, we only want them to work 10 hours a week because we don't want them to lose this benefit, or 20 hours a week because we don't want them to lose this benefit. When the employers are like, we placed a student with a credit card company that manufactures credit cards. One student went there. The next month they came back to us and said, can we have 30 more? 30 after one employee, because he's that good, he's that dependable, he's that reliable. And then we go to parents and they were like, you want your kid to have a job? That's a really good job. And they go, oh, well, are they gonna lose SSI insurance? Or not insurance, but SSI. And
I got to tell you about a lady named Kelly Lambert. She is at the University of Richmond. I saw her just a couple of days ago. And she's done a very interesting experiment with rats, except she called them her trust fund rats. We call them the SSI rats. So the SSI rats every day are taken out and put in an arena, and they just get some Fruit Loops. That's their favorite treat. They can just pick them up off the floor. Yeah. Now the rats that have to work, they pile up some shavings that they use for bedding the cages, and they hide the Fruit Loops inside the shavings. Right. So they have to like dig up the sawdust to get the Fruit Loops. Okay. So they train them doing that for a while, and the rats really like to get out and dig in the stuff. All right, now we're going to like give them the really weird, scary cat toy that's about this big with a bell on it with Fruit Loops jammed in there that they can't get out. Now the SSI rats are just afraid of the cat toy and hardly touch it. The rats that have been out there digging, they are very persistent, they don't give up, they really try hard to get the Fruit Loop out, and when you test their stress hormones, they're lower. Mm-hmm. I think this really means something right here. Yeah. Great experiment.
Yeah. Now we need a pet rat.
The SSI rats, and she calls them trust fund rats. There you go. Well, it's the same sort of thing. Same thing. But the other thing on the bagging groceries is people don't differentiate to where maybe that's a training job just for the summer and where it's appropriate career maybe for someone with much more severe challenge. But I've seen parents like train their kid to get SSI. I think it's just awful. Mm-hmm. But they go out and make good money as a mechanic.
Exactly, and we need more mechanics.
Bagging groceries might make pizza.
Well, bagging groceries is boring. Fixing cars. I mean, when we were working up there in the Cargill plants, we had to, there was all kinds of stuff that had to be figured out. Complicated stuff. Mm-hmm. Like I like to watch that show on heavy tow truck drivers. They got a semi tipped over and they got to rig it up just right to put it back. They had to do similar things like to get equipment into some of these old plants. Yeah. No, this is not the kind of work done by stupid people.
Well, exactly.
And they're hiring right now.
Right. And they're paying well.
And they pay well.
Exactly.
Full medical benefits.
Exactly.
Full medical benefits.
Yeah. So I was telling Jason earlier that we, again, we work on classic cars because they're cooler than every other car company except for Tesla, but that our students, there's no computer to hook up and tell you what's wrong with it. You have to learn how the engine works and how to problem solve and figure it out first. It's that same thing. We're trying to get kids to learn that first because there isn't always a calculator or a computer that you can plug things into.
Sometimes the computer's wrong, so.
All the ones I know. When I was in math class.
Temple, in your book, Different Not Less, which is a collection of stories, for those of you who haven't encountered it, of individuals on the spectrum really
writing in their own words.
In their own words, but at a point in their lives where they're in their 50s. And they're reflecting about growing up and careers and family and their experiences. One of the individuals you feature, I think her name was Charlie Devant.
Yeah, the tour guide.
The tour guide. She had multiple graduate degrees, highly intelligent, but described a deeply, deeply lonely life in high school and in much of her adult life until she found a job as a tour guide at a historic mansion in the Hudson Valley in New York, and she had a deep love of history, and she clicked, and she found a group that she was connected to. And I wanted to ask this group a little bit about loneliness and people on the spectrum, because it is pervasive. And
what happened in that book, I learned a lot editing that book, and what we did is it kind of made kind of a contest, and people were asked to write their stories, and we had like 28 entries. And to be in that book, they had to be not on SSI. They had to be completely self-supporting. And I deliberately did not fill it up full of computer geeks. I mean, I want a wide variety of jobs. There are computer people in there.
Yep.
There's a veterinarian, there's a doctor, computer people, there's an advertising executive, and I put the tour guide first. But where the diagnosis was helpful with these people later on in life was understanding their relationships. That's where the diagnosis was helpful. But I think in a lot of cases, the diagnosis is holding them back on the job front. I'm seeing too many parents, there's just no expectations for anything. Another thing I'm finding, grandfathers come up to me all the time, and grandmothers come up to me, because I have a slide about this. They discover they're on the autism spectrum when the grandkids get diagnosed. But granddaddy and granddaddy had a paper route, learned how to work at a very young age.
My dad's
I'm seeing that all the time.
sitting out there, and he'll tell you that at 14, he sat me down and was like, "You're 14, you want sneakers and clothes, you're gonna get a job." And he took me to a soccer field every Saturday. This is pre-cell phones because I'm old. And we had to sit out there, and I would ref soccer all day, and he would drop me off at 8 in the morning. He wouldn't pick me up until 5 o'clock. If it rained, I had no way of calling. You sat out there in the rain. But at 14, it was absolutely that, where you had to like learn to work and do that. So.
Well, when I was 15, I got sent away I went away to a special boarding school for kids with problems. No studying for the first 3 years. I ran their horse barn. Well, it was the School of Horse Barn Management. And then my really good mentor, science teacher, he came in late in the game. And he got me interested in studying. But you know what? I learned how to work in that horse barn. 9 stalls every day, put them in and out, feed them.
Tiffany, you told me some stories about what you've seen in the social dimension of the lives of people that work with you.
I mean,
what are you observing?
Who's been to a brewery? Right? So, we're very social. I have a bartender, Patrick, who is pretty nonverbal, and now he's speaking full sentences. And he said, the man wants to buy a shirt. It says Brewability Lab. I'm going to put his money in my tip jar. Yeah, you can have the money. It's pretty impressive. So I think they're realizing that those relationships do mean a lot. Tips mean a lot. So just interacting with the public, and the bartenders are pretty cool. So yeah, it's a cool job.
Bryn, it sounds like at Trimble you have a built-in relationship with the mentoring that you guys do. What do you observe about not only those relationships, but how your employees on the spectrum do or don't branch out with others in their workplace?
So the mentor helps in building relationships. One is, I think, not every company might be the right company to bring somebody in on the spectrum. So, I think, having an openness, having the ability to have mentors, I think those increase the success. So, as a very open company, and very friendly company, if you ever go to the SketchUp office, I encourage you to go there. Is when you walk in, it is a crazy place. There's drones and there's dogs and there's everything running around. So it's a very open environment, and so the mentor helps facilitate those relationships. But the company culture means a lot, so that the others are willing to have a discussion with somebody who's new, and that's an important part of the culture. And I think one thing that Casey, who you saw, who was one of our first interns, said something several years ago. Casey, I apologize for embarrassing you, but he just made me completely break down as he said, people look at me as another employee, not an employee with autism. And so the company culture is a key part where they embrace that. But the mentor helps builds those relationships.
Whether it's SSI eligibility or other workplace regulations, Tiffany, Danny, you've told me some things about how government and public policy, either doesn't help, could help, or actively gets in the way of the work you're doing. Could you share your viewpoint about whether public policy has a role to be helpful here?
Division of Vocational Rehab, which is through the state, has very specific ideas of who they're going to support. So typically, you'd have one person rolling silverware in the back of a large restaurant. We don't fit that model. So in order for us to gain support, which everyone thinks we do, you have to have 8 neurotypical people per person who's considered not. And that doesn't work with small businesses. They don't take into account your square footage, the way you're set up, the expertise of the staff. So currently we don't fit that model. We did get some funding from the city through mill levy. That has been cut this year. So
What is mill levy?
it's city funding from the taxpayers. It's earmarked for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So property taxes. So it is really hard as a small business to try to fund all of the supports needed to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Danny, how about you? What do you see on the public policy front?
We're a little different, Tiffany. We're a nonprofit, so we run into the same type of things where we try to get funding for our parents. As a father, and I'm sure you guys all know if you have children with autism, that right now the average family in Colorado spends $100,000 on services per child in the state. And if the average median household is $53,000 in the state, you're spending twice your average income on services before you even buy a loaf of bread or pay for your mortgage payment or rent or anything. So we make our program completely free for everybody. It's all done through grants and private donors, all those types of things. And just like Tiffany, where we go to DVR, we don't fit those boxes as of right now, where they do not see skilled trades as vocational training. I don't know how you can say that,
Wait a minute, you said what?
The government does not see our program as giving kids jobs, as vocational training by teaching skilled trades.
They don't think teaching skilled trades is vocational training?
They do not.
That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of.
Thank you. I completely agree.
You know, I'll tell you something dumb. When I read all the stuff about college degrees and what jobs are going to get replaced by computers, I mean, Business Week and Fortune and all those magazines that I read on the planes, they seem to be blind to the skilled trades because these are the jobs that are not going to go away. Electrician, plumbing, heating and air conditioning, welding, and all the auto and truck mechanics.
That's why my hair's so gray.
Yeah, and those are not going to go away. Where there's jobs with law and medicine, especially the high-end, that's in much more danger of being computerized out. I'm following the AI revolution really, really carefully. I can't believe they'd be that bad. You know what administratium is?
No, ma'am.
Administratium is an element that was newly discovered on the periodic table of the elements. In fact, our provost 20 years ago, back in the era of fax machines, that taped faxes about this on everybody's office door, and I still have it. It's the heaviest element known to science, newly discovered, and it has a huge atomic weight, and it reacts with absolutely nothing because it's inert. I find that unbelievable.
Yeah, the first meeting I went to, I just got my butt kicked. I walked out of it, and I just was completely scratching my head, and then we tried again, and I was scratching my head, and we tried again. And
what do they consider vocational training?
Resume building.
Rolling silverware.
Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, I've worked in the heavy industry. In fact, I'm going to be doing animal welfare training 10 days from now in the beautiful Newport plant where we didn't build a lot of the stuff. and I'm in contact with this all the time. Big, complicated stuff built by the special ed department in French Canada and Europe. This is what makes me crazy, is I go back and forth between the worlds. I think some of these people in Votech need to be toured around.
I'll give you
heavy
their email.
industry. All right. A lot of people have gone on the oil rigs around here. No barrier of entry. Texas, you can do it at 18, and you learn all those jobs. The FedEx driver can become head fracker in 2 years. You can end up in an air-conditioned shop doing machine work. Yeah, don't tell me that's not vocational.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Thank you.
It's crazy.
I completely agree. Yeah. So, I mean, that's been a big obstacle for us is just.
Well, I don't know what they're thinking of.
Yeah.
When we have a shortage of these jobs.
Yes.
I went on the U.S. Department of Labor website just the other day and was pulling down that we're going to have a 15% increase in the need for plumbers and electricians.
Absolutely.
I just looked at that like 3 days ago.
It's 30 million jobs are opening up in the skilled trades over the next few years as baby boomers retire.
Great jobs that are not going to get replaced by computers. You think that robot's going to go up on the roof and fix the air conditioner? No.
The next time one of them needs their toilet fixed, they'll wish they gave me some money. You know?
That's right.
So we're approaching 8 o'clock, and so I need to bring our discussion to a close, and I want to do it with one last question for each of you. And Danny, I'd like to start with you and work across and finish with Temple. And that question is, for the audience who's here tonight, and the folks that they may interact with after they leave here, what's one piece of advice or one message that you'd want people to take away from the discussion we've been having tonight and to leave with?
I think just that the strengths of our students are completely untapped, that we have this amazing population that's talented, that's smart, that's kind, that can do amazing work if they're given the opportunity to do it. So I think it's just being open to it, giving it a shot, willing to, as parents, let your kids grab a saw, grab a welding torch, get underneath a car, let them try, because they're amazing and they can do incredible things. So that would be my biggest words of encouragement is give it a shot.
Bryn?
Yeah, I think we should all have the vision of the unemployment rate for those on the spectrum should be the same as the general populace. And we should really focus on that. You know, Boulder County, Colorado is a wonderful place to live. And you know, we as a community go for many, many different causes. I'd ask all of you to go back to your employers and say, how do we start an intern program in 2020? How do you hire 2 or 3 interns by 2022? It's the only way we're going to be able to do it. We have to do it together as a community. I don't think you can depend on the government to do it. I think we as a community have to do it.
Tiffany?
Raise your hand if you've ever had pizza. Raise your hand if you've had craft beer. Okay, it makes a difference where you eat, where you drink, where you shop local. You know, you can see a viral video and say, oh, that's really cute, or that's amazing what you're doing. Oh, but I've never been there before. So businesses like mine aren't going to make it unless you come. Good. And so if you're going to drink the beer and eat the pizza, get off the couch, get off your phone, and come in.
Well, it's probably better pizza than some of the other stuff.
It is.
And give us the addresses then of Brewability and Pizzability.
So I-70 in Peoria for Brewability, and then Cherry Creek for Pizzability.
Right. And Temple, we have to give you the last word.
Well, I want to see these kids that are different be successful, and of course I tend to push more the skilled trades side because I've had so much involvement with that. There's also lots of opportunities in the cattle industry. Some of these individuals would be fantastic working with cattle. Pen writer, your job is to go out there and find sick cattle when they're just thinking about getting sick. There's all kinds of things with animals. We got to get them out there and get them exposed to it, because students get interested in things they get exposed to, and they find out what they like. They also find out what they hate, and that's also important. Mm-hmm. And even in the regular college students, we're pushing internships. We've got to be learning working skills before they graduate from high school.
Please help me to thank our panelists tonight. Thank you. So
I hope you'll all have a few minutes to join us downstairs in the cafe where there'll be beverages and more discussion. The silent auction will be open until 8:20. Please take a look and see if there's anything there. If you're inspired tonight, I hope you will, and you want to find ways to support Temple Grandin School, I encourage you to please consider a donation. But we are so grateful you came tonight. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you downstairs for more discussion. Thank you.